we have, hopefully we'll all be able to be victors. So in today's, before I move to today's lecture or discussion, I just want to give a basic recap of where we have come from. In our first lecture, we tried to reflect on really the essence of this subject and the importance and the role it will play in our profession, particularly in your profession as a computer scientist. My apology for that. And also we also tried to reflect in our situations, particularly in respect to our studies. We also try to reflect on the various areas where it's been used, the various system to broaden ourselves and actually be able to see that if you become actually an expert in some of these things, there is a field out there which is so broad. I must indicate that there are few people who have mentored here and there, and they're doing very well in modeling some systems and some places. Actually, from last week's discussion, when I was making a presentation of some work that I've done, I also get another paper, perhaps, which I've actually also submitted some work also on how we can use this modeling to design system. We need serious use of information experts, and therefore, before you come up with an expert system or something of that nature, then you need to do the modeling, what we are actually trying to do. So in what I submitted yesterday for publication somewhere, I was trying to reflect how do I use modeling to design what we call the inference engine. Basically, the inference engine, I suppose you could be aware that in an expert, rather in a decision support system, you have what we call the database, there is the inference, and there's the communication section. So I didn't focus on all these three areas. I only focused on the inference, which is the brain. That how do I actually model using mathematical, relationships, and then try to come up with basic rules that can be used. I really hope by the end of this course that most of you will be able to come up with those basic. I call them basic, but I believe from this group we should be able to have the next generation of Kenyans who will be able to change a number of things in the world. So then in part two of that, we also looked at what is really simulation, the importance of simulation in various parts of the industry of our life. We also later on reflected that models, and we tried to look at the various forms of models, which I said broadly, we basically start with what we call probabilistic, which we also probabilistic can call them stochastic. Then we went also ahead to actually also say that there's also deterministic. At that point, we also said that there are other examples, other next categorization which comes, which we say there can be discrete and continuous. That means now you are actually looking at the way a given model is affecting, rather is occurring. In fact, we call it occurrence. So in whatever that I've just indicated, model that I was looking, I looked at what we call discrete events. For instance, if somebody goes to hospital, he goes and makes, at a given time. So in that particular case, we say it's a discrete event. He goes, it ends, and so the doctor makes a decision. It ends. So in that particular case, we call it's a discrete kind of scenario. There are those that we call also continuous. We also said that we can also look at a categorization where we talk about static and also dynamic. We stopped at a point where I was to, at that particular point also, I was to give a graphical representation of this. My apology, I delayed to do that, but I have since updated it on the e-learning. You can actually be able to access that. How do we reflect it? It's more like a decision tree. It's used, not decision, well, yeah, we can say a decision tree, but it's hierarchical. So we start from the main, then we go down up to the basic down there, static or dynamic cuts across those. So then we moved ahead and also tried to look at aspects that relate to really modeling, trying to look at aspects, now the application, the convergence between simulation and modeling, which was our lecture number 3. We tried to make a bit of sense of this, and we had a chance to reflect on how do we convert 3 scenarios to come up with basic models. And I was very impressed, I must say, by the presentations that were made by the various groups. And I was glad to join a number of groups to listen to their discussions and also interact. So that is basically where we've reached. And so today, that is basically what chapter 1 was all about. So today, I want to start a new chapter. So that is verification and validation. Verification and validation. So here, what's the relationship between this topic and the previous topic? So that then we are able to see how we are progressing. Now, the first topic was basically trying to introduce what we call the fundamentals. What simulation and what is modeling, what we call the fundamentals. So this topic also is going to build on those fundamentals. That how do I actually say the model or I have is valid? How do I say that the model I have is working? So basically, that's the kind of question one is going to answer through this topic. So that it's like when you go out to do something, you want that assurance. Now, how do you guarantee assurance? So remember, if I may actually give another example in respect to the importance of this particular topic, in your IHS project, who actually joined from the eccentric group who with us here, you may have done it at the diploma level. Now, there is this section which is sometimes called testing. That system, you are always told, can you test? Or there is this chapter 5, depending on how it is given to you. It depends on the person coordinating the project. or the IS project, somebody would tell you, we need you to demonstrate um, whether your system is working. And then you are told testing. Now, testing is the same way as saying you want to verify. In other words, you want to show that something is working. That is what we call verification. In other words, is it working? How does it work? That is really like verification, verify. So that is the testing. So that's the similarity. So some of the skills that you're going to gather from here is going to enhance your understanding on system testing. Now, when you come to, for those of you, I really hope and encourage most of you to be able to, those who may can continue to their masters, really, because you guys have the ability. This is my first interaction with you, but I think I'm convinced you have the ability, and Kenya needs many guys at that particular level, so that we can really change the world in this aspect. So when you come to that level, we will now not start talking about testing. We require you to do what we call validation. So validation is actually a little bit more than verification, because in validation, you validate something by actually saying it. You make that use of that system in a real environment. Meaning, you want to, if you say that this system is going to do clinical diagnosis, meaning that maybe when you input the symptoms into the system intelligently uses those inputs, and then it does what? It gives maybe a recommendation that perhaps this person is suffering from this type of ailment. So in that particular case, you have actually used it in a real environment. So you must actually use a real environment. What I demonstrated last week in the model that I did, we were using what we call real patients that we recruited. Actually, they were in a particular hospital, and so we recruited them, but we didn't actually do what? We didn't this is what we need, so that then they can buy us the result. I think what you have always had, like when they're doing clinical trials of the, I think now it's a kind of talk when you listen to some of these, news clinical trials. They usually say when they recruit people who are going to participate in a clinical trial, that is testing whether a given medicine is working, they never tell those patients that you are participating in it, because it will bias an outcome. So the same is what we call validation. So generally, so you can actually see that this topic is so fundamental for those of us who are in this field, that is going to assist you when even you are going to come up with something that you're going to come up with, whatever it is, that you can actually be able to say, I've verified it's working, and I can validate it, it is also working. So so what we are going to learn therefore from today's lecture and this topic is, how do we do this? So therefore, by the end of the course, rather by the end of this topic, we want actually to apply verification and validation techniques to compare the defined model with the real system. So there's what we call defined model with real system data. So defined model, remember last week we talked about abstraction. It's like when you go to when you are writing a system, you usually, maybe if you are using a class, you actually start by defining the class. You just say the class has this data members and has this particular behavior. But then you don't stop there. You later on and actually go use, some data and then try to do. That's exactly. So defined model, consider it as an abstraction, with e.g. a class with real system data, meaning now when you generate an outcome, you want to see whatever my system gives me and what they compare. Yeah, that my system gives me 10. What does the real system give me? So that is what we call reading. That's how we are going to check on this. Then, so by the end of this lecture, therefore, we'll get to understand on how to validate different system models. We try to understand the difference between validation and verification, which I've tried to explain, but we'll see it a little bit. And also explain why is validation so important in modeling and simulation. In fact, as we even before I go far, this one I want to be clear on this one. Like you see in when people are coming up with tablets or drugs to treat human beings, they test them in maybe animals, or sometimes they do what we call laboratory tests. They always, in those laboratory tests, the outcome sometimes is it works perfect. But then later on, they realize, no, we need to validate. We need to confirm that really it works. So they now use human beings. So that's so validation becomes so important in the aspect that it assists in confirming on the ability of a given model to do what it is expected to do. Now, then we'll also look at the advantages and the disadvantage of validation in simulation. So to achieve this, that is really an introduction of what we are to reflect at today. So now I can start to explain how do we then achieve this. So as I've indicated, that the first thing is to understand what's the difference between validation and verification. Now, we say verification focuses on the accuracy of transforming a problem formulation into a model specification. So verification focuses on the accuracy of transforming a problem formulation into a model specification. In other words, this will build building the model right. You want to come up with a model be right, meaning a model can be right by having things that are necessary to come up with that particular model. Let me give an example here. If I want to write a system which is going to manage student records. Now, you can see in that particular case, I'm saying it's to manage student records. Then the question here is, what do I need to correctly manage the student records? So I must go ahead and identify the parameters that I need. So in that particular case, therefore, when I do my structuring of my system, it's clear that a student record, for instance, let's let's reflect in the case of a high school. Well, perhaps most of us may have left the high school. I know you guys will tell me the high school is a kitambo, some time back, which is okay. Let's reflect at university level. We are talking about student records. So then the best thing here, we are actually saying we must define a student. Because if I'm going to have student records, then I must reflect the student. Who's this student? So I must actually, what's the student? Components. So in that case, like the first name, second name, course they are doing, among other things. So you can see accurate transformation of the problem. So I transform actually saying I have captured the right things, which in this case we are calling model specifications. So I am identifying the right things that will actually capture all that I need for purposes of coming up with a system. That is what we call verification. Verify. Does it actually, in other words, test? Does it actually meet what we need? Does it fully describe the problem? If it doesn't, then you have a problem. On the other, so you can see therefore verification is at the start kind of up to a particular level. You can also reflect, if I can give a generic example also, if somebody is building a house, you see, must be clear what type of house do I want to build. Then what do I need to build that house? You are specify. Now, when you go to validation, it is checking if the model behaves with satisfactory accuracy and consistent with the study objective. What does that mean? It means now, if I build a house and I am saying this house is to be warm, then I must check that it is warm because that was the objective. Or I build a house that is going to withstand, storm. I am sure you've seen, and when I use this example, I use it with a lot of caution and understanding that a lot of rains have really affected most of our people. Which is very a bit disturbing. But I hope things will go on. But I think perhaps I better use an example. There is this famous, I do not know, but you can Google somewhere. There's this guy called Otonglo, who was, is it Otonglo? Yes, who was, one time in a drama festival, he was invited to State House to entertain the president. Among to put that clip during the break, you can also be able to see. Then what did he do? This gentleman was trying to demonstrate, was describing his life in one of the areas in Nairobi, and he was saying that in his description, he was kind of making fun of him, that his house was made of these polythene papers. And so one time, I think the owner of that place came that, give me something or I look for the eraser, eraser plate, eraser to cut, the house, which was in the form of polythene. You see, in that particular case, so you can reflect here and ask yourself, and in his mind, the objective was to have a secure house. Now, then if he is to validate that it's secure, generally, then you can see he would have come up with a razor plate or a knife and tried to cut that, polythene. And if it cuts through like that, then it is clear that the house is not doing what is expected. which therefore you can see in the first case, verification was like is focusing on converting an open space to a house. That is it. But now the validation is this house meeting the objective? What were the objectives? A house, a warm house. So it goes into those nitty-gritties, which then we talk about right model. Do I have the right model? You may have, yes, a model, which is what we're calling, you have a model, but then the other thing is it the correct one? Is it the right one? So validation assists you to answer, is it the correct one? And how can we say it's the correct one? We can only say it's the correct one if it performs what it's expected to do. It's the correct one if it performs what is expected to do. And so that is really the whole thing. So that's the distinction. Now, conducting verification and validation analysis are essential checks performed prior to analysis of a model for purpose of establishing model credibility. So so basically that is the essence. In other words, one will ask, why do we do this? We do this for purpose of actually saying this model is credible. Something which is credible is that which can be dependent, can be trusted. You see, that is how it can be. It's like you are putting out a system. However frowly words you use to describe it, if it doesn't do, then it does not really make good sense. So that is you check on the trust, and when trust is usually what we normally say consistent, that is able to achieve what is expected. So that's the essence. So the reason as why we do validation and the verification is for purposes of credibility of our model. Now, there are a number of ways in which we check on this, as we are going to see shortly. But before then, we want now to look at phases. Is simulated, that is, it will always have what we call two phases, two sections. There is this first one, I really hope everyone is seeing here. There's this one which we are calling run, the run phase. So it is divided into two by this dotted line here. This dotted line, okay? This vertical broken line. So there is the run in, and then there is the steady state. The run in and the steady state. I'll explain each and then the consequences they have. Now, in the run in, you see there is what we call increasing growth, what we call the run in phase. I'll say usually like any system, when you start a system, initially you start with nothing. As time goes by, perhaps you populate in data, you start accumulating data, you start changing a few things. So you start adding new modules. So you may start with one module, increase to two, increase to three. You may start with basic functionalities. You start increasing as time goes by, and that's what we call state. It means the system has reached maturity and now it's being used. So here, saying that there are no new functionalities perhaps that you are putting in, only that you are doing maybe basic maintenance and actually checking on how the system is working. There is something here I want you to see on the vertical axis what we call work in progress. Meaning here, what are we measuring? We are measuring work in progress. Work in progress in terms of what? Are you doing anything with your system? For those who have had a chance to interact, I think there could be 2 or 3 individuals in this class who are in HP lab doing something there. You recognize that when you are doing a system, there's a time when you are working on the system coding, then there will reach a time when the system, you are not coding, but you are actually not of the system. The system is being used, but work that you are doing in the system is not that a lot. That is basically what we call a steady state, meaning that everything else is just not in, there's no increase in work, active work, but there is what we call maintenance. This is very important. Now, this section here, run in, is one of them. For those of you who are going now to be management, in the run in is where you will deploy your resources. You will need more people to work. You will need more resources in terms of maybe even space and such kind of things, because people are many. There are many things that you want to do. So in this particular case, therefore, you need a lot of work. We also call it active system development. Run in can also be called active system development. Now, on this is what one can actually say maintenance phase. So even in a simulation environment, you'll expect that kind of scenarios to happen. So meaning that there will be that state where you are actually maintaining the system. There is no work which is increasing. Please allow me to bring order here in a minute. Sorry, my apology for that. So that is basically how these phases move. Now, in this, the most critical now phase is not even this one here. The worst phase in the system and even a simulation. Usually, we normally say the response or turnaround time must be fast. Like, I'll give an example. If you've done a system for maybe clinical management, what happens is that the system must always be active, so that then it's able to just reflect if the system goes down and this system is maybe managing people in ICU, for instance. So you can see everything might go wrong. So this is a very important phase, and that's why you want to ensure you maintain it. Otherwise, this simulation run typically starts in the empty and idle state. That's why we are saying at 0 here. The run is therefore characterized by run in, followed by steady state, what we have here, which illustrates the key phases of simulation. So the run phase is generally ignored and is only used for investigating the effect of transient. That is basically in abstract sense is like this is where you want to see what happens. Okay, conditions such as starting up a new factory or performing radical changes within an existing facility. This one here, because I think this more in management, which is like it is where you are starting out something new, like where you are starting a new system. So you can see there. That's why I said with it there is test here, test, and you know no much to lose. But now in the steady phase is of great interest, which I've actually explained. At this stage, checks must be made to ensure no long-term trends exist, such as continual buildup of stock in the factory that suggests the model. Hence, the real system will be unstable and workable. That's exactly like, say if you are having a system and then you are seeing there is, upward and, the system is not consistent. Maybe like you put in some information, it gives today, it gives this, tomorrow it gives the other, and then that is a very untidy kind of situation one will need to be. Having looked at that, at the phases, now then where does validation occur? Now validation will occur in two parts. Before is what we call at the abstract level, and that the second one is at the implementation level. Now, this is very important now to relate this to the phases that we have seen up there. The abstract model itself is more like, right? Is like run in phase. Model run in validation occurs in two phases, in two parts. At the model level, remember validation we said right model right, okay? So right model. So you want to ask yourself that this model or this formula, can I use the word formula for now? This formula that I have, is it the right one? You know, it's like when you are finding just to bring this in, not more into focus. When you want to find, and I use this, this is a perfect example, I think. There is a student who applied to join one of our master's program, and was given these aptitude tests that they are given to do. Some are very basic, as you are going to hear it, but sometimes because people get scared, I don't know what happens. She didn't do very well. What happened is that the question was like, write a program that can do what? That can determine whether a triangle is isosceles is or not. Just basically like that, a code that can determine it, whether it's isosceles or not. Now, what the candidate did was like maybe she misunderstood the question. She wrote a formula for calculating or determining the area of a right angled triangle. Now you see, she used the right formula. No, she used, she has a model in the name of, for calculating, what the area formula of a right, not the right model, because the right model says isosceles triangle, all the three sides must be equal, meaning therefore, according to him, or rather according to her, she has a model. But is it the right one? That is the question that one will ask in abstract model itself. Validation of the abstract model itself is to check whether you are having the right model. Validation of its implementation. Now, in the implementation, now it was, it's like now check this and then now use it. You see, if this person then went to do the run of the code, obviously the abstract model is not going to work. So you see, it is not going to, it will give result, and the result is going to give is the area, but it's not going to return, a determination, because if you are to determine whether it is how to call it, whether it is an isosceles triangle, you can only say yes or no. You see the outcome, and this is very important, and this is, I hope we'll be able to remember this. So you can see the outcome from here. In that particular case, if you were to determine whether the triangle is isosceles, the answer values is going to be binary. Binary in the sense that it's going to be yes or no. But now when she gives the other formula of calculating the area, the outcome of that area, the answer would be what we call integer, a value, a number. So you can see they become two different things. So I really hope here we understand each other, that in the validation here you are looking at, do I have the right model? Do I have the correct formula? Then when you come to the validation, is my formula giving me what it is expected to give me? Because there is what we call expectation. Basically, that's what it is. So therefore, how do you do this? You do those in the first part consists of examining all assumptions which transform the real world system into conceptual model. You consider all assumptions. Now, I'll give, again, I continue using the example that I'm trying to use. You see, we normally say that isosceles triangle can actually work, the determination of this, something is isosceles, can only work if you know the measurements of the sides, the three sides. If you don't know, then you can't. So that is now, therefore, you see, that's the assumption that you are actually trying to say. And then the other thing is, like, you must understand under which circumstance a given model works, such that then you can relate that model to the real world system. Now, I now start introducing what we call into conceptual model. Okay? So as I talk about conceptual model, I think, again, we mentioned it earlier on last week, I think. Please try to reflect it in respect to database design. In that particular case, then you will be at least somewhere near. So therefore, we transform the real world system into a conceptual model. In other words, now you are changing let's say, if you are actually saying diagnosis is done ABCD, can you change it and write it into maybe a formula or a relationship or a diagram, etc. That's what we call conceptual form. Testing the validity of an implementation, which is now number 2, part 2 of implementation, consists of checking the logic, which is what I have indicated, like I expected an output which is yes, but I'm seeing an output which is a number. You see, that becomes logical error. I believe you guys know the forms of errors which you get when you write a code. The system will give you a result, but the result is not what you expect. It's different from what you expect. Does not make any logical meaning. That is not, making sense. That which does not make sense, then because it's logic. So you check on logical, consistency, the flowchart, and the computer program to ensure the model has been implemented correctly. So in other words, here you are checking, okay, if when we talk about flowchart here, we are trying to analyze when the input comes in, it is processed, and it is output. Does it make sense? How does this program really work? So that is what you are testing under these two parts. Now, to put this in context, or to put this in perspective, here is a diagram which is illustrating this. That is figure 2 shows the verification and validation activity in the system. Please forget about the verification for now. Yes, there's a comment. Yes, there is going to be, sure. In a minute, once I finish this, shortly there will be a breakout shortly, actually, in a minute. Need to finish something before we go for breakout. This chart here. Can you please repeat what you meant by saying conceptual model? Yes, conceptual model, the transferability of is the or a diagrammatic representation. That is the versions as concepts. Now, when you present these or these variables in the form of a relationship, could be a math. What happens is that then you are saying this is a conceptual model. Variables, you are diagramming something to your friend, you will maybe write down, and actually now, let's say I moved from point A, you draw a line B, then in point B, you decided to go to C or to D and say kind of things. That is what we call a conceptual vision. In other words, a way in which you are communicating or representing measurable attributes, which in this case are what we call value. Yeah, so let me explain this diagram. In the figure up there, on the upper side, you see there is the cause, system, and effect. And then down here, you see there is input, simulation, and output. What does this diagram mean? As I've implied up there in validation, you want to compare your model together with what? A real environment. In other words, you want to see, does my model capture correctly a real environment? Remember, and I think we have actually said, and I'm happy you not say we are not having issues. You know, when we talk about a system, in this class, we like what I'm actually saying, in what happens in I'm not gonna, let's say the cause is a patient. Here is the doctor, and the doctor will an outcome. Maybe an outcome here becomes maybe the diagnosis. So you can see the patient will come here and explain his cause. Will say, well, I'm having right now. Let me use the case of COVID. Come and actually say I'm experiencing. No, because that could be difficult for now. Let's use malaria. I think that would be better. Somebody will come and actually say, I'm experiencing, joint pains, headache, high fever, and say kind of things. Then the doctor who's here will actually process all this information and then will say, fine, considering all these things, then you are suffering from malaria. So that becomes the effect. Now, that becomes in a real environment whereby we are using a real environment. Now, when you come to this one, we are saying, okay, suppose we don't have this doctor, actually have a model doing this. In that particular case, you see, you are not going to have a patient coming. So that's why now we start talking about input. So in other words, you as the person coming up with the system, you are like, what does the user on the other side input? It will be now the input. So the input will be those symptoms that I've described. We'll say, well, joint pain, headache, high fever. Then here, you actually now in your system simulation model, you start thinking, how do I put this relationship? You start actually saying if, so you can see you start using, this conditional statement. If high fever, joint pain, headache, they usually check 7 out of 52. Then you see, the outcome now will not, they say now an output. So they give an output. So down here, do what? Here we have our model. So we want to see how our model performs. So you see here, I'm putting the input and I am coming up with, maybe I say, tells me, malaria. And here, somebody walked in, explained to the doctor, and the doctor also concluded malaria. So now you see, when you compare the output and the effect on the other side, if they are together, if they relate to one another, then you say your model is good. That's how you validate. So you say the model is validated, meaning now the model can now do what? Can take the place of the doctor. That is the basic aspect. So you can see in the outside, you are looking at the validation, which is the same as now you are looking at structural validation, and there is what we call behavioral validation. I think I'm going to share with you that paper that I showed you last time, which will also explain a little bit. Now, in the structural validation, you are looking at here, structural validation, you are looking at things to do with what is like the variables. Okay, what are the things that I need in order for this system to work? That's what we call structural. Allow me to take you back to database a little bit. In database, we start with conceptual structure of a database. And when you decide, I don't know, because I'm not the one who handled that unit, so you can pardon me if I use a different language, that other system that you use. I'm going to use Oracle. Now you see, in Oracle, you would always define the structure of your table. So when you define the structure of the table, you are able to identify, the size, of the various fields that you are going to have, the data type that you have. You see, those are what we call structural things. So you validate. How do you validate? You are checking when this person comes here, this patient comes here, he will say, I'm having high. You see, high fever is expressible in terms of what we call character, okay, or a string. These are the things which are expressible in strings. So when now you come in the simulation here, you must confirm that the input that you are going to take are declared in the form of what? In the form of strings. Otherwise, if you declare them in the form of integers, and yet we know clearly that the inputs are not going to come in the form of numbers, then you see there will be a problem. So that's what we call structural validation. You check if here I have actually declared my inputs to be integers. But when I go into the real circumstance, they are not integers. Then I have violated what we call validation rule. I hope that is clear. Say that then, if I put here a string, and up there, when I go up there, I realize, yeah, when people come, they express themselves, say, yeah, I have, mild headache. Then, yeah, when it's going to come in the model should also capture it as a string, because up there is a string. If up there, people actually the body temperature is like now for the coffee, they say come and actually say no. So you see here, if here that's what it is in real, it is a number. In that case, is a float. Then here I must declare it as a float. That's what we call structural validation. Now, in the behavioral validation, you are looking at when it comes out here, how does it get to be communicated? Like we are saying, the doctor will express himself that maybe potentially having this type of disease. So, and also here, the system should also conclude. If your system concludes differently, that you've given the correct input, and maybe your system logic here, where you have written your inference rules here, you've written them correctly, perhaps, but when it comes here, it's totally different from what is there. Then we talk about a behavioral issue, because it's about this. We said verification focuses on the abstract level. The transformation, it is the transformation of what variables or system variables will be like, how do I move from the conceptual into a model? In other words, how do I actually change those letters, which I said, for instance, if I'm tracking movement, that I want to come up with a system, and for sure there is a request I've received on the signing a wellness. We call it wellness monitoring. Monitoring. I haven't given it a good name, but you want to know for how long, how fast, and such. If any one of you is interested in such a kind of things for your project, it's a worthwhile to do, and it's an interesting one, really. You can actually use the concept of wearable things, and then you can come up with something. So if I use that as an example, so you see, in a manner of actually saying, if somebody is moving from point A to point B, and we want to know how fast this person has moved, and then we also want to know how much calories has this person burnt. So then now we get to know how well this person is. So remember here, they are saying point A, point B. But in between there are questions we are asking: how fast, how much calories. So you see, how do I convert those things? Things I can actually draw it. I can actually say is A, move B, in fact, I think I need to write that one in a chart. I can actually say it's A, moving to B. That's number one. But then I have the question which say, how fast, how much calories. So you see, we how many calories have been lost. So you see how many calories like that. So you see, in this particular case, this is, by the way, a conception which I can consider, and I can actually say we transformed. Remember your transformation, matrix transformed to B is dependent on, let me say, movement or fast. I call it speed. So I'm actually saying it's dependent on speed. I'm trying to write and also dependent on here what we call energy. Carol is gives energy. I expect energy. So now is something which is abstract, which is conceptual. So the question then we ask, how do we have we changed it correctly? Change from conceptual in the model. That's what we call verification. You are those that are necessary. That is how it is. And that's otherwise we want validation there. Now, there is something before we take a break to reflect. Allow me to take you through, yes, allow me to take you through these things a little bit. This one a little, but now we want to make sense of this. Now let us consider an experimental system data model denoted by D. So there are so reflect on the experiments that you are doing in high school or another place, an experiment you are doing. That experiment, you had what you were calling a setup. Data model or system data model, okay, is an experimental setup. So in that experimental setup, you can call it D. Or better still, look at a house, okay? A house used for maybe, I think you've seen what we call storage, like the zeros for cereals, storing cereals, or warehouses that are used for storing things. So in that particular case, when I want to use the cereals, the ones that are used for the storage of cereals. So they are set in a manner that they operate at specific room temperatures or the conditions they are known. So that's what we can call that an experimental data model. So when you are coming up with, with that kind of way in which you want to structure your what you want to come up with a zero for storing something, then we call it experimental system data model, and we can denote it. Just denote it by, you can call it, if you are not comfortable with this, you can call it X, right? Then it's therefore important that this differs in terms of data output depending on the experimental context. What does that mean? And this is very important because in a research I did in 2010, and I think I published some paper, we say there is nothing which is a fix-it-all, meaning the type of another cereal crops that are grown, I'll give an example of Eldoret. For a number of you who come from Eldoret, you know that There is a 0 in Eldoret. And there are those of us who come from Meru. There is actually a 0 there. Now, in Eldoret, we know they are going to store, maybe Meru might not deal with a lot of serious. Then let me look at Narok. I believe you guys know the structure of the country, Kenya. For those are friends who are coming out, joining us from outside, I want to give an explanation. In Eldoret, largely, the type of cereals or cereal crops which is grown there is maize. So therefore, you'd expect that a lot of maize will be produced and need to be stored in what I'm calling the cereals. And therefore, the cereal that I expect to see in Eldoret is that which is designed to store what? To store maize. When we go to the Narok largely known for wheat farming. Now, this wheat farming, since it's in excess, it must be stored in the cereals. Now, what happens, therefore, you can see this, all these are zeros. There's a 0 in Eldoret to store maize, and there's a 0 in store wheat. You can see in terms of structure, they cannot be the same. Now you can see where now we are actually talking about here, the cause, which is the system, and then the structure down there. You can see the structure now comes in. So you can see what we need, the moisture content for maize will be different from the moisture content for what? For wheat, meaning the dynamics are different. Now, the dynamics are different, what we call now experimental context. Experimental places where you are doing what? The experiment. All right? So, meaning therefore, we are saying if we call this as 0, or rather 0, now when we come here, we say therefore we can denote the contextually applicable model as this. Now, you see this one, there is a base conceptual model that all of them, the first thing is that the first, so I can actually say I can put on the chart, they are saying the first thing is that they are all zeros, okay? Now, at the base, this is when we say base model, okay? They are all zeros. Now, when we come to the next level, now in the next level where they are applicable, we say what type of zeros, okay? So when we ask ourselves what type of zeros, we can actually say wheat zeros. So now in this particular case, we are now not moving into the base model because the first one was base model. Now in this other one, we are not now in base, we are now in specific. And then the next one will be maize zeros, okay? So in that particular case, therefore, now when we move to the next level, we are now saying, okay, they are all zeros, but now we are more specific about the type of zero. That's the next level. So in modeling, you start now saying, okay, where do I start? Where do I move to be specific? And we normally say, you may have the same template on how to do a system, or you may have the same framework on how to do a system. But you see, you will need to know a few other things before you come up with it, isn't it? Then, therefore, conception, which is now this other one, which is now specific, accurately represent the real system behavior in the experimental context. Meaning now, the wheat 0 and the maize 0 are specific, they represent really an environment. Now, so what then do we need to see? Also consider a real system model that accurately captures the behavior of the system denoted by. So this is my last presentation before we take a break. Also consider a real system model that accurately captures the behavior of the system denoted by derail. Okay, so in other words, now we are actually trying to say, assume now there is a real, remember these are the models. Now here you are saying there is a real system. So we say, from mathematical point of view, if your model is good, this conceptual model is good, then it must be real. So that's why we're saying now the maze zero in Narok, in Eldoret, should be really, if you design a maze zero which is working for Eldoret, it must be the real, it must be equal to the real maze zero in Eldoret, meaning that the two must work together. So this is when you are in a real perfect situation, that the conceptual model should be equal to the real system. So when you achieve this, then you say this is a perfect system that you have and represents a validation. Now, I want to give you guys a break of 10 minutes. A break of 10 minutes. So we'll reconvene after 10 minutes. Then we discuss the remaining part before we have a breakout. So we'll take a break of 10 minutes. Please reconvene after that 10 minutes. So please have a short break for yourself. 3 minutes late. Because I was trying to respond on the chat, there was a question, perhaps you've seen. What's the difference between the D-based conceptual model and the D-conceptual model? So I'm using different words to try to explain this. I'm saying the D-conceptual model can be considered as a generic model from which a more specialist model, D-conceptual model is built. So if you look at an abstract, can actually use this. We can reflect this, e.g. an abstract class. If you look at an abstract class, can be D-based conceptual. In this case, conceptual model. Okay. Now you see, from an abstract class, you build, specific classes which you call specialized. So you see, specialized class would be having those attributes of the base class, but in the most implementable manner. That is actually how you can also reflect on this. I hope that clarifies. And then here I'm therefore saying, so you can see what must be real. It is that which now is that which thank you. Is that which is specific. So, and that's why the D space cannot be real, and so that's why here I'm presenting that the D conceptual model becomes actually the real system. In other words, now a more specialized class becomes really what we are actually saying, that which is doing what is expected. Then with that, then we can move to the next subsection. Sorry, seems to be Then there's what we also talk about, experimental frame. What is an experimental frame? From your research methods and technical writing class, you talked about what you call a population and a sample. I think I've used this maybe example previously, but nonetheless I'll use the same. So if, for instance, I want to study in student performance in Strathmore University, So my target population will be, uh, students in Strathmore, all across from the, diploma or short courses up to the PhD. But then my sampling frame, means that where am I going to pick from? I might not pick from all this. I might actually be only interested with informatics and computer science students. So then it means now my sampling frame is further broken down students. Then I put another condition: information, rather informatics and computer science. So you see, I have moved from that which was big into that which is small, which now becomes my experimental frame. So in other words, therefore, suppose the above models are used in an experimental frame. What does that mean? They are used in a specific place, which is, fulfilling specific condition. Like the example I gave, suppose these zeros that we have designed, they are used, let's say the width zeros is used in Narok, and then the maze zero is used in Eldoret. Then you see my sampling frame will be Eldoret and Narok. That's what we call it. So therefore, experimental frame experimental frame will be denoted by. Now, you can actually see like the example that we have, one I said. Now, let me like the D model given E. In other words, you are saying the model given it is in Narok, for instance. And then here is what do we usually get from there in real situation given it is in Narok. So I cannot actually compare the conceptual model when E here is Eldoret and here it's Narok. You have to compare the same. So that's why I say the zero given in Narok, what is really happening in Narok. So that is how you compare them. So we are saying that the experimental frame, so when you compare this, so this is further we are trying to say, how do we further validate? We are trying to say the concept model and the live model, the real system must be the same. And they can only be the same if where they're working is the same. That's why, and this is very important for you to note, and even when you are listening to people talking, these vaccines that they are testing, they must, a vaccine tested and found it's working in, let's say, in the US, does not necessarily mean it's going to work in Kenya, because, so that's why we normally say, okay, you test it there, but we'll also actually conduct our own tests to confirm that it's doing what? It's working. So because, the environment is different, and that's exactly where we are saying that this model can only be okay. We are further trying to say we must give the same condition given this. Equation 2 implies that a valid system model within experimental frame E, which means the conceptual model captures the real system. That is basically another way of explaining that. And therefore, this is the best that can happen to any model. That you are saying, I pick this model, I use it in this particular environment, it gives me this. Such that now, if you put, let's say, a serial 0 in Meru, the circumstances are different. So that is what we are saying, that it must be compared in the same environment. Types of model validity. Now with that basic understanding, then we start actually saying types of model validation, and this is one way you can validate your system. Which the first one is what we call replicative validity. What does replicative validity means? Replicative, it means producing similar. Okay, replicate means, and it comes from the one of the principles of research, what we call replicative principle. So replicative validity means that the model has the ability to produce the input or output of a real data system, right? So meaning this. So now in this particular case, now we are comparing that whatever we are coming up with and with the other generic one, they are comparable. So it means when this condition, this one is equal to this. The next one is predictive validity. Predictive means there is the ability to do what? There is the ability to predict. The ability to, that the model has that ability to predict. Concerned with the ability to identify the state model should be set into to allow prediction. Prediction, that means of a response of a real system. That can I use my model to infer or to predict what a real system should have been? So that becomes a subset. Okay. In other words, here, this is a proper subset. If you remember your discrete mathematics, we talked about subset, proper subset, a set, and such kind of things. So if something is to predict something, it means it represents it. What does that mean? It means like from databases, if you have, I think I need to bring that, relational algebra. For instance, when we have x, if we say x represents y, what does it mean? It means if I have x, I have y. That's what it means. Therefore, 1 is the same, we say it's the same as the other. Okay? Which now, when we say 1 is the same as the other, it means if I have 1, I don't need the other. Because in that case, when 1 is, that's the basic algebra understanding. So if I store 1, I need to store the other, because the information I have in X, I can find it in Y, or the information I have in Y, I can find it in X. So I don't have to store both. So with that understanding, then we say that a conceptual model is predictively varied in experimental frame for a real system if it's replicative validity. First of all, it must fulfill the replicative validity, the first one, and then we say it represents. Yeah, and that's why. So the first one, because you can see here, that's why we call it proper subset. The lower line there is equals to. That means the first condition is fulfilled, where there is S here is what we are calling conceptual model or base model. If you replace S with conceptual model, then you are having F. Rather, F conceptual. If you replace S with base conceptual, then you are having F conceptual. In the coming week, nonetheless, I'll be writing. You will be able to see on a whiteboard. For now, please allow me just to use that pointer here to demonstrate. So with that, then we are saying is the set of input output functions of S within experimental frame. What does that mean? It means that this section using the same resources, all right, at this particular, it's the same as giving the same output for the other one using the same resources. Okay, so essentially we are saying that if you have one, then it's equal, you have the other one, even and if you change the structural validity, as I've talked about structure, it relates to how, which is again you saw in the particular figure 1, how we were talking about the other and other structure and such kind of things. Focus on the structural relation between the real system. It relates to the morphism. Okay, morphism here. So we say that a conceptual model structure is varied in the experimental frame, which we set up there for a real system if it fulfills what we call the model structure. We call what? The replicative ability. So what are for? It means it must fulfill condition number 1 and the condition 2. Of validity, first it must fulfill condition number 1, that is fulfill what we goes on to fulfill the predictive validity, and then feed your model to model within frame A. What does that? That morphism means a means. Now you can even reflect this into when we talk about an abstract class. Because there cannot be many forms of the actual, because if we are saying the zero in an arrow for width must be this, it is that way. So the zero for width must be, a specific condition. It can't change. But then when you just say a zero can be for maize, can be for beans, can be for potatoes, can be, anything. But no, potatoes is not a zero. Or, beans, I think, rice and such kind of things. So you see, a zero, when you say a zero, you are not saying for what. But now when you, so this conceptual is a zero, right? And therefore, behind it, we can say it can have many forms. That's what we are actually saying here. But this other one here is, we are actually saying the structure, and this is an important concept. If we are able to get this, let me copy it. I hope it's in the chat to repeat correctly. Yes, there we are. This is good. So I can actually write something here. What it means on this other side, I want to say is a specialist class, given, that is what it is, given given an environment, and then there is this other symbol here. Allow me to use a particular, I use this one, given abstract class. So that is basically how I want you to look from, from the object-oriented, class. So what that means, therefore, the interpretation of this means that this specialized class can fit to any form of the abstract class. That's what this concept. So when that is achieved, that a specialized class can equally fit, because remember, a specialized class came from the abstract class. So meaning that the abstract class has the specialized class has the properties of what? The abstract class. So in that particular case, you are saying you can take any form of the abstract class. This is when we say it is structurally varied. Now, the validity is conducted at a time t, and therefore all the models are time dependent in this particular aspect. So validity is time dependent, and therefore, because remember we also talked about context up there. So the next thing here, a simulator implements a conceptual model and is thus a source of obtainable data denoted by this simulator. So if you implement those models, then the data that you are going to get there, can we say data from the simulator? D represents data from the simulator. It's possible to prove often by design a structural relationship that moves him between a conceptual model and a simulator, then the following will hold unconditionally. So in this particular case, you are actually saying now, how do we relate with the data obtained, all right? The data obtained with the conceptual model, given the various forms that are going to occur. This condition cannot work. Here where we are saying D, conceptual model, given experimental frame is equals to null, which is equals to this simulator given experimental framework is null. I want to explain what this means. On the chart here, sorry, this now I can't capture it very well. So what it means is like saying, because you have moved from what you are calling the specialized class, so I pick the specialized class. Now we have the specialized class, but we are saying this specialized class, the experimental is null. So that's I want to explain. What does that mean? A null experimental frame meaning that you have not constrained it. Okay? So meaning now you are actually saying the zero in Narok, the width zeros, which is adaptable in Narok, will give us some data, isn't it? So meaning it will tell us for how long the width can stay there, and and such kind of things. Now that data it will give us, so we are actually saying is now, instead of calling it abstract data, now abstract class, we are actually saying data class. Data class. What does that mean? Whereby now the data class, here we are also saying the data class dependent, and I will also explain this so that is contextually clear. So what it means, so with that, if it is like that, then like what I've written. So basically what it means is specialized class given the experimental frame is null is equals to the data from that particular class, given also the conditions are set to null. What it generally means now, if I pick that specialized, I go back to the width zeros, given. So the with zeros is will operate given condition is equals to null. Just allow me to type something in order to post it. Is equals to data from zeros when these conditions okay. So it means this. It means with zeros is equals to the data it produces. So meaning therefore, the data that we get from a with zero in Narok will report moisture, will report temperature, will report, all those things. The same data will be reported by another zero, which is maybe stored where? Maybe in Isiolo, because those are the parameters. So because the data is reported on the parameters, it does not necessarily depend on what the environment. The values will be different, but it is not, the kind of the experimental frame. So that is basically what it means on this. Now, I want to give a breakout, session for you to do the following. I think I'm going to put it on the chat to select. So the discussion point, reflection point is to select as reflection point. Select a case and try to relate it to the concepts discussed. Okay, the concept discussed, that is what will be the base model, conceptual. Okay, remember all of them, they are generally base conceptual. Conceptual conceptual model. Then we are saying conceptual model. And then we've seen on and then the next thing is how will you okay, what will be the ideal validity form that will apply in the validation of the case. Okay, so you can reflect like the case of Sirius I was giving you. You can pick on many, but I want you to reflect it as a team. So I'm going to form a groups. My apology, I know this thing does it, how to call it, randomly. So you might not be in the same group you were last time, but I believe you can work with your picks. Then the other thing is, remember, as I said, the first person in that group is the chair of that group. Please coordinate it. So I'm going to create 14 groups, and I'll be joining each group shortly. So groups are open for you to join. I'll join each. Thank you. I want to reconvene this. My project didn't manage to get into all the groups, but allow me to just say I'm very excited with the discussions that I have actually seen from a number of us. Very enriching, and thank you. Allow me to request somebody from room 2 to make a presentation of what they did, which was very interesting. And then we also, there's a room I didn't go, room number 12, and then room number 10, room number 9. But allow me to start with the room number 2. Room number 2, Nyaganga, I think it was Walter. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
So for first question,
Yeah.
we had the one for base and conceptual models. So we decided to use a scenario of how illnesses react to drugs or medicines. So for our base model, it's like generally how the illness will react to medicine in general, like either is the drug supposed to cure it or is it supposed to suppress it or anything like that. So that was our base model. For our conceptual model, now we are going down to like how a specific drug will cure a certain illness or how a specific illness will cure a certain drug. So that was our conceptual validity. So now the types of validity which we're supposed to test. Now with the conceptual model, we have the one for we have two instances. Either you go to a hospital sick with a specific disease and you're supposed to be treated. So that one we were saying it will be the type of validity to use to test it will now be replicative validity, where you already know a certain how a specific drug is supposed to cure a certain illness. So what you're trying to do is now replicate the same results in each new patient that comes. So like when the doctor is prescribing, he's just trying to bring back the same result which you already had to the new disease. Another instance now is when you come with a new disease. Now let's say like a corona. Now we'll be using predictive validity. This now we are saying you have a new illness. So now you're trying to predict how it will react to the different drugs which are being tested right now. So like when they come like to Kenya with the new drug, they're trying to predict how it will react to the new drug. So that was a presentation.
Oh, great. Um, I thought they had done a good job, and equally the same groups that I listened to, but I don't. I just wanted um, to bring one of us to share what they did. Uh, thank you, Walter, on behalf of now, allow me to bring in somebody from room number 12. My apology, I didn't manage to join your group. So, the chairperson of that group, please, may you indicate, if you won't mind, what you discussed?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Alan from Group 12,
Yes, Alan.
and we had for a model we had discussed on a greenhouse controller.
Oh, great.
So for the base model, another base model would be the general controller for managing a greenhouse, and for the conceptual model would be a controller to manage a greenhouse for that is for green tea. The replicative validity would apply in that the same way the controller works at an optimum level in the base model would apply to our new model for green tea. In the predictive model, predictive validity, sorry, we see that we want the model, our model to be able to detect changes in temperature. For example, if you have low temperature within the greenhouse, it would change to produce the target output, which would be a rise in temperature and optimum conditions for growth. For structural validity, we weren't quite sure about that. We were hoping that you would guide us through it and explain
Okay.
it.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alan. On structural or constructive validity, we are looking at, you see, this that you want your system or you want your maybe sensors to accept. In the model logic, you may that your sensors are going to accept it. Maybe let's say, can I say data values or inputs which are of specific type. And now when we say they are of specific type, it means they may be binary. If they are of binary in nature, and then you realize that whatever that now you are inputting is not necessarily binary, but is something which is continuous. So you realize then that there will be a problem in terms of what your model is expecting and what is happening in actual sense. So when there is that element of what is happening in the actual sense, which is real now an environment, and what your logic is actually computing or accepting, then that becomes a structural issue. Now, structural validity therefore requires that two must be in sync. That what your system logic wants and what is happening in reality, they are the same. They are the same. I must indicate 2 years, I think 2 years ago. Yeah, in fact, this month, it will be exactly 2 years. There was a student who was actually conducting more or less the same study like what you have mentioned. And she had models, and one of our logic model had actually, she had done perfectly what she could possibly do. Like any system, there'll be limitations. Now, she wanted to actually make recommendation on the type of like the likelihood of a particular disease affecting particular, crops in a particular area. Now, you see, for you to make that determination, the occurrence of not, in fact, that was not a disease, a pest. A pest, or the occurrence of pest attack in a particular place cannot be dependent on a single parameter. And what was the parameter she was considering? She was considering the parameter of humidity. Now, then you see, but in reality, for one to determine the likely type of pests that are going to occur in a particular place will require more parameters. So you see what she has done and what we need in order to make that prediction, they are totally different, or to what usually determines the occurrence of those pests is totally different. So you see the outcome is different from what you are likely to be, which we normally say, therefore, the system logic will give us more false positives than the other one, which is in reality. So that is how you look at those kind of validity. And then I hope that clarifies. There's a comment. Excuse me, sir, could you please assign me a breakout room? That's when. My apology. We've just concluded. We are just concluding. Actually, we have how many minutes? We have 8 minutes to the end of the class because it's supposed to be up to 2:15. My apology. I understand, but I will encourage you to try to do the exercise alone and actually get in touch for any clarification. I'll be glad to offer and support if necessary. So thank you. That was for room 12. Allow me to invite somebody from room 10. Please, the chairperson of room 10, may you kindly share with us what your group discussed?
Hello.
Hello, Stephen. Stefan. Yes, Stephen. Yes.
Yes. So in our group, our model was measuring the performance of athletes based on certain constraints. So that was our base conceptual model. Then our conceptual model became measuring the performance on football athletes specifically. Then our experimental frame would be football athletes in Kenya. So then to measure the validity of a model, we consider that the predictive validity will fit well because we are trying to see if whether we change constraints such as supplements they're given, if it will affect the performance. So if we change them in the model, will it reflect the prediction in real life? So that was our discussion.
Oh, great! Thank you. That is quite interesting. I wish I had invited our the president, Nikki Mwendwa, the president, to to listen to this. This is very interesting. Why didn't you consider the Premier League? You decided that our Kenyan. I don't know. I'm not a fan of the Kenyan league. Why did you pick the Kenyan league?
Because there's no place like home.
Yes, I like that. The charity starts at home. That's very good. I encourage you. We always solve our issues. I think it makes sense. And I think one group, I don't have to mention the group. You, Wanya is a group. You focus on a narrow. Don't do very broad. Focus on a narrow because it becomes very easier. And finally, room number 9. Room number 9. The chair for group number 9 or any member of group number 9, please, you will kindly share with us your thoughts. Yes, I can check the members of that group, but group 9, the members let me not recall them, but I think they know themselves, but it's okay. Perhaps they have forgotten theirs, but we can leave it at that for now. So let me now request anybody who has any clarification or any question before we conclude today's discussion. Please, you can ask. Yes, Anton.
I wanted to ask when you were talking about a conceptual model, was is it like an actual digital system? Does it have to be a digital system that you're modeling, like you're modeling a real world thing? now in a digital system?
Thank you, Kavai. It's possible you may implement this digitally or non-digitally. But what we are actually saying a conceptual model is that an abstraction or representation of a real, real occurrence, real system. Remember when we talk about system is ways of doing. Maybe if you are actually looking at, you are modeling how farmers track their earnings from, farming activities. So how do you represent these things in maybe diagrammatically or mathematically? What measures, in other words, what are the measures that you will use in order to track the earnings? So you see in this particular, you are going to track maybe quantity produced, selling price, expenses, all these things. When you put them together, how do they interact? So by the time you put these things in a form that is understandable, we say that's a conceptual representation. I must indicate here, conceptual representation can both be descriptive or narrative, diagrammatic, or mathematical. But for the case of what we are doing, we are trying to use mathematical for now. And also, you saw there was also the graphical, like figure one that we had there. Narrative, somebody will describe, when I, produce this, I produce this amount of quantities, like that. But you can transfer them into what you are calling mathematical form or into diagrammatic form. But for implementation now, when you now start coming with an electronic version of that, then you see you start now applying other sciences like, okay, how do I convert these, things written in this manner into maybe an algorithm, not an algorithm, into a computer understandable form. So you see now you start using specific regulations. So that is how it is. That's how you can look at it. I don't know, Anton, whether I've clarified further your point.
Yeah, you have. Thank you.
Most welcome. Any further clarification? Now, if there isn't, we will stop here, but I know I had promised I was to put a particular video. I promised it will be the first one next week about the guy who had his conceptual structure of a good house, which turned not to be a good house. So I promise it should be the first thing we will see next week. Otherwise, I want to wish you well. Keep safe, keep praying, and let's keep on hoping for the very better. Otherwise, enjoy your afternoon.